Hello, today's video is about your expectations. This is a fascinating area. The research shows that your expectations determine how your students do. Now that seems ridiculous, but there are many studies which show that even if your expectations are wrong and you've been given the wrong data on your class so that you think they're much more able than they are, well, they will actually do much better than if you hadn't been told those expectations. And so this video is a way for you to think, well, how can I trick myself into getting rid of all the baggage that I have and all the prejudice, because we all have that, don't we? How can I trick myself and have really high expectations for my students? Just how powerful this is very, very easily revealed by sitting down and looking at the names of all the entrants to Year 7. So before you've met them, and just sit down with a colleague, go through each name and decide which level you think they've got. It's incredibly powerful as a way of revealing both your prejudices and how accurate they must be. And because your guesses will be right, I would say probably with about 65–70% of students, you think, hey, my prejudices are actually pretty spot on. But you're forgetting about the 30 and 35% where your expectations are completely wrong. And that's what this video is about. How do we have really high expectations for everyone? Now, expectations are free and they have an incredibly powerful effect on student improvement and progress. Much more powerful than the value of your degree, which took you 3 or 4 years to get. Interesting, isn't it?
In this part of the training, therefore, I asked you to look at questions from other subjects so that you could coach the teacher of another subject through the mark scheme, through the question, to get them to try and find a way to teach that skill as early as is possible. And that's determined by when the learners are ready for it. And then I want to show you some data on expectations, because it's our expectations of how students learn that determines when we teach something. And if we're teaching something too late, it's because our expectations are wrong. So we're going to look at some data from other schools and some national data to work out when it is that we should teach things in order to become a brilliant school. The data system that we use in school is CISRA, and I'm going to show you a way to use that to ask the question, how can we use the data that we have in school in order to model more effectively? And then finally, I'm going to look at the idea of revision. Another way of saying this is, how can we get the students to learn more without us as teachers always having to do more? And there's a real danger that in any training, a senior leadership team are asking the staff to do more, and I don't think that's the right way to go about things. I think we ought to just do better, but not to spend extra time doing it. So let's look at this astonishing piece of research. The need to learn curriculum is the idea that we teach children what they need to know at the right time. So we ignore when the exam is. We're not preparing them for an exam that's taken in Year 11. We're actually just preparing them for brilliance in our subject, and they just happen to take an exam in Year 11. And this idea of acceleration, teaching things more quickly, gives us an incredible value added, a D of 0.88. You remember that the average is D of 0.4, and this was ranked by Hattie in visible learning as 5th out of 137 possible interventions. In other words, is incredibly powerful to accelerate your students. And this doesn't just mean entering them from an exam early, it means giving them a new curriculum, a different curriculum that moves them through your subject more quickly. So in order to explore this, I looked at Balcarres School, which is a Gloucestershire school like Chipping Campden is, and I've included this in the video because none of this information is privileged or private. It's all in the public domain. I've taken it straight out of the performance league tables that are available to anyone with a computer and an internet. So this is Balcarres. They're high attainers in English and Maths, 90 and 97%. compared to ours of 91 and 94. Not really significantly different. But it's with their middle attainers, these are the students who arrive on a level 4, that they score really highly. Over 90% of their middle attainers making expected progress, compared to Chipping Campden, where you have an average of about 76%. Now that's a big difference, especially when you consider that in both schools, this middle attainers group, the level 4 group, is probably the largest group, or at least as large as the high attainers. So schools that do better than us, and Balcarres of course is first in Gloucestershire for this kind of progress, do so with the middle learners, not so with the low attainers. So we're much more successful with low attainers than Balcarres, dramatically so, but because in both schools students entering on level 3 are probably only averaging about 10% of our cohort, it doesn't make a significant difference to the overall results. So how does a school like Balcarres get much better results from their middle learners? Well, one explanation could be they simply have much better teachers. But that can't be true because our teachers are getting very similar results from the high attainers, and so their ability as teachers not in question. They must be just as good as the teachers in Balcarres. What must be the difference? Well, I'd like to posit this idea. In Balcarres, they have higher expectations of the average student than we do. And it's the expectations and the way that we don't accelerate our middle pupils through at the same rate as they do in Balcarres that results in our students not making as dramatic progress. You can see that our students make very good progress here, but if we're looking to improve, then this is the level that we should be aiming at. And I think teacher expectation can be influenced by the climate of the school that you're in. So I've included here some selective schools in Gloucestershire. So here we have Marling School, which is virtually a grammar school. It's selective, and it's got an outstanding in its Ofsted report. But the students who entered in level 5 only average a B+ in that school. I say only because in our school they average an A-. But something interesting happens. We've already seen how they were averaging an A- in Balcarres. That's what those figures suggested. But I've then taken the 7th best school in the country, St John the Baptist Comprehensive in Woking, and their top ability students also only get an A-. And in another school local to us, Ulster Grammar, they get an A. They're only slightly better. So if we're doing so fantastically well with the more able, so that we're in line with the 7th best school in the country, what is it that makes John the Baptist a better school in terms of progress? Well, it's this. It's these students who are entering on level 4 are achieving dramatically higher grades. That can't happen because their teaching is better, otherwise these would be different. It's happening because their expectations are higher. And similarly here, students entering in level 3 are doing phenomenally better. Again, that might only be 10 students per school, but I think it shows us how much higher expectations are for middle ability students there. And I think that's where schools across the country can improve. It's in their expectations, and particularly this middle ability cohort. Now you'll see that in the grammar schools, the middle ability cohorts do well, but actually that's probably again only about 10 students. These are students who have very high IQs and have just done not so well in the SAT tests. Now incidentally, lots of teachers complain about the SAT tests not being reliable indicators, but these exam results from grammar schools suggest that's not so. These students probably did really well in their 11+, but the Key Stage 2 tests have predicted, because they didn't get level 5s in all of them, that these students are not best at studying, at making the most of their intelligence. So kids entering on level 4 still do worse in a grammar school, even though they're just as intelligent as those on a level 5. Then finally, I included Pates Grammar School, to see what the highest expectations would look like, because they get an A star on average, an A star minus for all their entrants. Although there is a difficulty in interpreting this, because the best students in Gloucestershire tend to go to Pates Grammar School as opposed to the other local grammar schools that they could get into. And this is why there are no students in Pates who entered at level 4.